Educational Communications and this station present Environmental Directions with Nancy Pearlman. On this series, we explore the effects of human influence on the Earth's ecosystems and discuss solutions to environmental problems which affect the quality of life on this planet. Environmental Directions gives you the kind of information you need to help you participate in decisions impacting your community, the nation, and the world. Now, here's your host, Nancy Pearlman.
Hello. For the next half hour, we are going to be talking about new forest, land, and wildlife management techniques to protect redwoods and other forests from fires, climate change, and human impacts. With my guest, Beatrix Jimenez Helsley. She is the Natural Resource Manager at the Sempervirens Fund. She has worked throughout California in environmental consulting and remediation as a biologist, performing plant and wildlife surveys, habitat restoration, and environmental compliance. And she has also interned with the Peninsula Open Space Trust, assisting the land stewardship team. Welcome. It's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you for having me.
We should begin with the name of your organization because it's from a Latin root. Sempervirens, I think, means always green, but the redwoods use that term. And your organization is California's oldest land trust, which is marking its 125th anniversary. Why did it start, and what does the name mean?
We started in early 1900 when we saw an opportunity to protect big basin redwoods from being clear-cut. So we came together to protect this area and purchase that land. And so Sempervirens, or Sempervirens, means always green, and that comes from Latin, but the scientific name for coast redwoods is Sequoia sempervirens. Sempervirens meaning always green.
You mentioned the Big Basin Redwoods area, and that is now a state park, but in addition to having previously been threatened by logging activities, in 2020, the CZU complex fire burned over 95% of it. What is left?
That's correct. The redwoods are still there. In some areas, the fire got really hot, so there is damage, but we know that that is good for our redwoods. They need fire to reproduce, stimulate growth. They are currently resprouting from the base of the trunk and from the boles, which is along the trunk, and that's something that they've adapted to for hundreds of years. And what's left is the redwoods are still standing. Areas that did get burned hot, and the trunks are a habitat for native species. There are plants that are coming up that are triggered by the fire, so plants known as ceanothus, which is a big nitrogen fixer, so it processes nitrogen in the soil. Other fire followers like Yerba Santa that comes up, and over time as the canopy regrows, these plants will be shaded out. Then we'll have other plants coming up. Sorry.
Redwoods are one of the species of plants that can handle fire, if not a massive forest fire. They seem to be able to recover easily from fire. But how many species of redwood are there? I know there's sequoia. We have a Sequoia National Park. How many state parks and other preserves do we have protecting the redwood? Because I think it's also the tallest tree in the world.
Yes, that's correct. So coast redwood is the tallest tree in the world, and then the largest tree is the giant sequoia. The scientific name for that one is Sequoia dendrum giganteum. Then there is another redwood, the blonde redwood. That one is, I believe, in China, where it's native to, and that's an interesting redwood in that it is deciduous, so it drops its leaves, as opposed to the giant sequoia and the coast redwood, which are evergreen. They keep their leaves up all year round.
They also live for hundreds of years. Do we know how old the oldest tree is?
That's a good question. I don't know at the top of my head, but I believe it was something like 2,500 years.
Amazing. There is so much beauty in walking through a redwood forest. I have loved it every time I go to the different places. You mentioned Big Basin. Where exactly is that located? Because I know that you're also active in the Santa Cruz Mountains, and of course in the Sierras we have the redwoods also.
Yeah, so Big Basin State Park is located at the heart of the Santa Cruz Mountains. As it's in its name, same big basin. It is a big basin in the mountains, and it is about an hour and a half south of San Francisco and about an hour from downtown Santa Cruz. And to the east of it is Santa Clara Valley. Some folks also call it Silicon Valley, and we're based here in the San Francisco Bay Area.
Why do I think of the redwoods in Northern California or the Sierra Mountains?
Yeah, so to the north there are host redwoods. Their native range is in the southern portion of Oregon, going down to Santa Cruz Mountains, down to Big Sur, so in the central California. The other redwoods that you're thinking about too are the giant sequoias, which are found in the eastern Sierras. Though similar, they're different because of the environments that they are adapted to.
Have any biologists or naturalists gone into these protected areas and actually counted how many redwoods we have left? And also, outside of the protected areas, there must still be a few individuals.
Yes, I'm not aware of anyone counting every single redwood. However, we have some great information gathered from satellite imagery, and with current technology, we are able to use this tool to understand where redwoods are, and this technology can also determine the height of the redwood. So that's a way that we can try and determine, all right, how many redwoods are in this area, and it's a tool we use to identify areas that need to protect, so we can see where some of the remaining old-growth redwoods are. And for the most part, the majority are protected. There are some that are on private land, and I believe there's about 5% of old growth remaining to be protected.
Redwoods survive the weather conditions beautifully. Fire, they're an excellent building material. And unfortunately, because of that, they were extensively logged. Obviously, we don't want to log these ancient trees. Are there many new secondary growth forests where people have planted redwood and they've come back to their natural area?
There are some areas where there have been planted redwoods to help restore them in their native habitat. We at Semper Virens Fund have been doing restoration work, for example, thinning some of these dense redwood stands because they are too many trees per acre, and that causes overcrowding, makes it challenging for those trees to compete against each other for light and nutrients. And so there are actually areas that it's too many redwoods, and we go in to help select which ones to remove with the goal of growing larger redwoods for the future.
It's hard for me to believe that somebody who's a conservationist is saying there are too many redwoods. I always thought there weren't enough.
I know. There can be too many redwoods, and they could put them in danger. That's more standing fuel, density, unhealthy trees can make it challenging to go through extreme weather events, and that's why we are playing a role in managing our lands, because for millennia they were managed by indigenous people and who are still here today through cultural burning. We use prescribed fire to burn through these areas. Folks think that these areas have been preserved, or previously folks think that these areas are just wilderness, but they're not wilderness. People have been playing a role in these forests and even the adjacent habitats like grasslands, which are essential for species that are living in redwood forests and other species. It is important to make sure that we acknowledge that there was management and still is management in these very special ecosystems.
As a natural resource manager, you are trying to protect the ecosystems. Is the major issue fire or climate change or both?
I'm going to cheat and say climate change. Fire is an issue, but climate change is an issue.
Years ago, conservationists fought to stop a major highway through our Redwood State Park and other parks. Is highway development and other human development still a major threat?
Yes, there's still the threat of development in a redwood forest. I mean, when you do development, you do disrupt the native ecosystem processes, not usually asphalt or cement in the redwood forest. So these things can disrupt the ecosystem. And so that is a concern that we have. Bringing in development into these areas could hurt these native species. It can be a challenging one because there is a housing crisis in California, and there are also people living in the wildland-urban interface. We call it the WUI, W-U-I, and that is something that has to be balanced with the protection protection of natural resources, but also places for people to live. The fire is definitely, I think, has shown a lot of people like, hey, I need to manage my land in order to not only protect my home, but also just the surrounding areas. Because during fires, when a house burns, oh my goodness, that house burns hot, and that can worsen things. Well, yeah, just like redwood forest, they would just quickly kind of consume it. But with a house, you've got all these chemicals and hazardous things that are just exploding and can make things worse.
Obviously, we're protecting the redwoods, the forests, all the flora and fauna. They're all endangered due to the issues that we've been talking about. But some species are truly threatened and endangered and get put on national endangered species lists or California endangered species list to get special attention. Are there any connected to the redwoods that are on those lists?
Yes, there are. There is the endangered marble murrelet. That is a seabird that nests in the redwood forest. There are salmonids, so the coho salmon and the steelhead trout are others that are threatened and endangered that inhabit these redwood forests and creeks. There are also, I believe, some of the plant species. I'm trying to remember which ones exactly, because there's like the rare plants in California, and then there's some that are species of special concern and others that are threatened and endangered. So there are several species that call redwoods home that are threatened.
You got degrees in biology, in earth science. You did research on soil ecology, biogeochemistry, vegetation, ecology studies. How's that differ from working with the big trees?
It differs quite a bit. I've been involved with surveying the endangered marble murrelet, a seabird that lives most of its life out at sea and comes inland into coastal redwood forest and Douglas fir forest to nest. This is a very rare and elusive bird that many folks didn't know that it nested in redwood forest. What is this seabird with webbed feet doing in a redwood forest? And it wasn't until I think in the 70s or so, somebody climbing a tree at Big Basin saw this bird with webbed feet, and that's when we learned that marble murrelets nest in these areas. And so I've been a part of some trainings to perform inland marble murrelet surveys. What that looks like is waking up about an hour and a half before sunrise and making sure you're there before 45 minutes before sunrise, because that is usually the time that the bird comes from the ocean and flies inland, typically following creeks as their pathways to fly inland to their nesting sites. As part of that, you have to stand basically 2 hours straight. You can't sit or anything, because the whole point is for you to really focus on trying to track this rare and elusive bird that's flying 100 meters to 200 meters, 300 meters above you, and it's zipping by going up to 65 miles per hour, and it's dark and it could be a little foggy, and so you're trying to look for this bird and also listen for its calls. It does a very distinct kind of keer. It's like a kind of a sound, and you need to distinguish that versus other birds, because that can kind of sound like a seagull, for example. And then you need to distinguish it, seeing it flying above you again versus a swift that may look similar to it. And so that has been an experience to survey for this rare bird in our redwood forest. And the reason we do this is because we need to understand where they are. And when you're rare and elusive, that makes it really challenging. But that helps determine whether or not someone can do particular harvest or a restoration effort in some areas, because you don't want to impact this nesting bird. But it's also a balance, because we want to protect these areas, and many times we do need to do work in these areas. For example, I mentioned the thick, dense forest, and that's fuel. So how do we set this area up for success? Well, we need to thin that area where there is their habitat and where they are nesting. So we do our best to be strategic in our timing to restore these areas. So a lot goes into it to protect this endangered bird.
Quite an experience, and so important to do the protection that's necessary. Redwoods don't live alone. A forest has many, many other kinds of plants as well as animals. Even though nobody's counted the redwoods, has somebody at least counted how many different species of plants are in the forest with the redwoods?
Yeah, that's a great question. I believe there have been studies looking at the number of different species that are present in redwood forest. I don't know that number at the top of my head, There are several plant species. I'm thinking plants that can live in the low light understory like sword fern and big chain fern. There's species that are flowering like snowberry or redwood violet, two-eyed violet, and then there are other animal species like pumas, also known as mountain lions, as well as foxes such as the gray fox, the spotted skunk, and then there are many decomposers like the banana slugs that are consuming the leaf litter and matter. Then there are like voles and the moles, and then there's many organisms below ground in the soils and microbial bacteria, fungi, and more that are essential for our nutrient cycling and our carbon cycling.
Lots of insects, reptiles, amphibians, and of course birds. Some of them are resident species and some of them are migratory?
Yes. So there are some birds that live most of their life out at sea, which is the marble murrelet. When it is time to breed, they come inland to find a tree where they can lay their egg up in the canopy, and then once they've matured, they go back out to sea. There are other birds like the screech owl that are present in redwood forest. You can picture red-tailed hawks flying over, perched on redwoods. The migratory birds that come in this area as they make their way north to breed. Some that come to mind are several different species of warblers that pass through these areas.
We're going to talk more about all the wonderful forest life in our redwood forests when we return in a moment with my guest, Beatrix Jimenez Helsley.
Environmental Directions with Nancy Pearlman continues with further discussion of the world's critical ecological issues. For more information, you may call 310-559-9160 or go to www.ecoprojects.org. Now, here's Nancy.
I'm speaking with Beatrix Jimenez Helsley. She is the Natural Resource Manager at the Sempervirens Fund. We're talking about redwood forests, primarily here in California. We have been talking about the wonderful wildlife that accompanies these beautiful trees. But to protect these trees, your organization has started some very active forest management techniques, some innovative ones. Could you explain what you're doing so that these trees and the ecosystems are restored, that they are resilient? You mentioned prescribed burns, but you're also doing selective thinning, biomass removal, fuel breaks. Tell us some of the actions that are undergoing to help these forests.
So we've been playing an active role in managing our forest lands. This has involved doing forest health projects. That means reducing vegetation in the understory, reducing that fuel. We're doing watershed restoration, such as removing invasive plant species and removing invasive animal species like bullfrogs. We are restoring our areas and looking at it ecologically because we want to make sure that this forest is set up for success. And by that, I mean to be resilient. I can't control what's going to happen with the weather and our climate, but we know that if we can set them up in areas where they can be resilient, they can withstand a chance, even when it comes to catastrophic fire. So reducing the fuel in that area benefits them, which is why we have made burn piles, which is basically a stack of wood that we burn off because we don't want to just leave all that biomass on site. And we are doing prescribed burns, as I mentioned, working with CAL FIRE to burn strategic ridge lines, which are the areas that are key when fighting a fire and being able to manage the fire in a strategic manner. We do a lot of research and collaborations with local research institutions to understand the effects of fire that it has on the landscape. So learning from them by granting access to such key areas.
Even though I live in an urban environment in the city of Los Angeles, I have to get out into nature and get the experience of being close to the other life on the planet that is so incredible and beautiful to be in, to look at. You came from Southeast Los Angeles, an urban environment. Do you encourage everybody to get out of the city and get into nature, take the hikes, take the walks, experience something other than the city? And how did you get involved in getting out of the city?
I do encourage people to get out and take a closer look at the environment. Even if it's just getting out of your house, just go walk around and look at the trees, look at the plants, look at the birds, look at the insects, and then encouraging them to go visit local parks and state parks and our Forest Service lands, because it is a different experience. It is rejuvenating. I think we sometimes think like, oh, we are separate from these native kind of habitats, but we're all sharing this. The foxes were here, the coyotes were here. This is a part of our ecosystem, and we all play a role. And for me, how I got into this, I went on a big family field trip with my Salvadoran side of the family. We went to Sequoia National Park. I was in like 8th grade. I'm like 13 or so, and we went to Sequoia National Park, and I was just amazed that this was several hours away from the big bustling Los Angeles. I not only had the pleasure of seeing giant sequoias and seeing these areas protected, but also the clear skies. I could see so many stars. I didn't know there were that many stars just coming from LA and the smog. And it inspired me. It inspired me to be a part of something like this, that be a part of whatever protects these areas, manages them, studies them, which is why I pursued a degree in biology. And more specifically, I studied more ecology and evolution. It's why I wanted to study earth science, help me understand climate change, but also the soils and the geology and the things that shape these environments. All this interconnectedness of all these aspects of it just is so, it excites me.
Glad you got inspired. Explain how a land trust functions with doing the forest protections, because the parks, whether or not they're national, they're state, they're local, county, regional, have their own governmental resource people. How does a nonprofit organization like yours interact with them, or do you only work on lands that your organization has purchased and protected?
Yeah, that's a great question. We are a nonprofit. We have technical experts on our team. I have training as a biologist, an ecologist. My colleague has training as a forester. We also work with technical experts in our region. We work with foresters and the Santa Cruz Resource Conservation District and the San Mateo Resource Conservation District, which help private landowners manage their lands. We partner with state parks and other local county parks when we can make an effort to work across boundaries, because I can be doing whatever I'm doing in my 10-acre area or 20-acre, 50-acre, but we know when we collaborate with each other, we can do more. We can make a greater impact in protecting our area by doing more landscape scale conservation work, and that can mean just partnering on a grant. For example, the CAL FIRE Forest Health Grant. We need a minimum of 800 acres, so working with our neighbors, seeing where there's a need in order to benefit the region and the area as a whole. We have a network of other large private landowners that we communicate with to partner on projects and seek funding. We all bring something different to the table.
You mentioned some research going on. As far as I'm concerned, as an environmentalist and conservationist, there's never enough research for us to truly understand all the plants and animals out there that we should be interacting with, which we depend upon for our own survival. Some of the research goes on for a long, long time. I recall in your area that a mountain lion researcher worked for 7 years to try and understand the mountain lions and only saw them in the wild about 7 times, had to depend on the radio collaring. So some of the animals are hard to keep track of, but the trees are always there. They don't move around, but do we really know that much? And what more do we want to learn and know about a redwood tree?
We want to learn so much. We want to understand how they will be impacted by climate change. What do these extreme weather events mean for them? We want a better understanding of their genetics. Our researcher, Dr. Zane Moore, who was studying redwoods and their genes and their genomes, and it left him with more questions. We also want to understand the impact that the fire has on these trees, how they respond even to these really high severity fires. We can see in redwoods their tree rings when they've experienced fire in the past. So there have been big fire events, and most most recently with the 2020 CZU fire, that was a large, mega catastrophic fire. So the importance of monitoring and understanding these impacts will help us currently and future researchers.
Many conservation organizations such as yours focus on an individual species, but it's more than that. It's lots of species of plants and animals. It's an ecosystem. When you're protecting a particular forest area of redwoods, you also have to look beyond that area to what's called the watershed, because what is happening around a preserved or protected area is important to be sure that the creeks and the rivers bring down the necessary nutrients, that there's not a negative impact of development of human highways or construction of homes or something else that will interfere with the system. So there really needs to be a border area to our national and state and regional parks. What more needs to be done to protect the surrounding areas where redwoods actually are protected?
Decent habitats that are non-redwood are also essential. The focus is protecting redwood forests as well as other important natural resources in our area. For example, oak woodlands. There are many forbs, which are like little plants, like herbaceous plants that are food for native species. I think about grasslands as well, where you have many flowering plants and seeds and different animals that forage in that area. That's where raptors go and hunt, or foxes, for example. There is the importance of the forest edge. So at the edge of the forest, you typically have many raptors perched or owls. You also have bats in these areas, so animals that come out at night to forage. The insects that are present there, and I think about the creek and the creek habitat there where osprey can go and hunt for fish. And then there's the riparian habitat on the banks there that provide a different source of food for species. Watersheds are all interconnected. What's happening upstream impacts downstream.
Your website has some beautiful pictures of what is there to enjoy and see, has some of the statistics. If one wants more details, how to contact you, what is that website?
You can find more information on our website, which is sempervirens.org. You'll spell that SEMPERVIRENS.org.
You welcome volunteers to join you on your work?
Yes, we have a volunteer program. You can find out more information on our website. There are opportunities to join us in invasive plant removal days, cleanups, such as picking up maybe trash on some of our properties that are adjacent to heavily trafficked areas. And you can also be an ambassador in representing Semper Virens Fund and talking about us at tabling events and other community outreach to explain the importance of our work and the protection of redwoods.
When I have gone out into the forest and walked among the redwoods, I look up. I can't see the top of them. It's a wonderful experience, though, to be surrounded by these ancient living creatures that have been around for so many hundreds of years. What kind of experiences have you had?
Many magical ones. Our coast redwoods are charismatic megaflora. They cause a sense of awe and make you sometimes feel so small, but also so big. I enjoy walking in the redwood forest by myself, identifying what little plants are growing in the understory and the flowers. I've enjoyed getting down on the ground, looking at little organisms making their way, or watching a banana slug eat an American trail plant slowly and hearing them munching. And then when you sit quietly, you start to hear the activity of birds, the warblers, the sounds of beetles, native beetles munching on the wood in the canopy. And you also can hear just the wind as it kind of goes through the trees. And it can almost feel like a hug being around that as some of the pollen and leaves start to kind of slowly fall. It's almost like a light rain, it can feel like, especially when there is dense fog. You do get those little microclimates. They create their own little weather there and can feel like it's raining on you under the canopy. The smells as well, just that earthy smell. And then when the sun kind of comes in and hits some of these plants and it releases this like fragrance, it's such a special experience to be in the redwoods and just explore their habitat.
I'm so pleased that you are working so so hard and diligently to save these forests so that hopefully everybody can go and have the kinds of experiences that we have had in visiting these beautiful trees and other wildlife and flora and fauna. Thank you so very much for letting us know what's happening with our redwoods. Thank you for being my guest.
Thank you for having me, Nancy.
I have been speaking with Beatrix Jimenez Helsley. She is the Natural Resource Manager at the Sempervirens Fund. I'm Nancy Perlman. Thank you very much for joining us, and do tune in again next week.
If you would like free information about these environmental issues, go to www.ecoprojects.org or call 310-559-9160. Environmental Directions with your host, Nancy Perlman, is a community affairs program of the nonprofit organization Educational Communications and this station.